The gunshot cracked through Cedar Valley's peaceful morning like thunder, freezing 12-year-old Emma Williams mid-step as her gentle giant Thunder collapsed to the suburban pavement. Officer Derek Mitchell stood with his service weapon extended, smoke curling from the barrel, while Sergeant Tom Bradley watched with cold satisfaction. It wasn't a dangerous animal attack, it was an execution. Emma's scream tore through the October air, raw and primal, as 850 pounds of black and reddish-brown Brahman bull crumpled before her eyes. Mrs. McReynolds dropped her coffee mug on her porch, the ceramic shattering as she fumbled for her phone with trembling fingers. Thunder had been Emma's lifeline since her mother's death 3 years ago, his massive frame gentle as a lamb with the traumatized child. Now his intelligent brown eyes were dimming as Emma crashed to her knees, small hands desperately pressing against the spreading crimson staining his beautiful coat. "Call the colonel," Mrs. McReynolds whispered into her phone, her voice shaking. "Tell him they killed Thunder." Neither officer knew Emma's father was Delta Force's most lethal operative. What happens next would leave everyone speechless. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Emma Catherine Williams had known grief far too intimately for a 12-year-old child. 3 years ago, a thunderstorm had stolen her mother Linda, leaving a void in their family that seemed impossible to fill. The car accident had been sudden, violent, and senseless. Linda's vehicle hydroplaning on a rain-slicked highway, spinning into oncoming traffic before Emma's horrified eyes. The little girl had survived with minor injuries, but the psychological wounds ran deeper than any physical trauma. A bright student with a passion for astronomy and a collection of colorful notebooks filled with observations about the night sky, Emma had retreated into silence after her mother's passing. Her warm brown eyes, so like her mother's, had dimmed, and her infectious laugh had become a distant memory. Night terrors plagued her sleep, panic attacks struck without warning, and the simplest tasks became overwhelming challenges for a child trying to navigate a world that had proven itself heartbreakingly unpredictable. Colonel James Robert Williams carried his elite military status like an invisible shield. At 42, he had served in the most dangerous corners of the world as one of Delta Force's most decorated operatives. His missions remained classified, his medals locked away in a safe rather than displayed. Standing 6 feet 2 inches with broad shoulders and a disciplined physique, Jim moved with the contained power of someone who knew exactly how lethal he could be. Despite his imposing presence, his voice remained gentle when speaking to his daughter, and his hands, capable of extraordinary violence when necessary, were infinitely tender when brushing Emma's hair or reading her bedtime stories. Widowhood and single parenthood had carved new lines around his eyes. Extended deployments weighed heavily on him, each separation from Emma a fresh wound. But he believed in the work he did, protecting his country and innocent families like his own. The irony that he could safeguard strangers across the globe while failing to shield his daughter from local corruption would soon become a bitter reality. Thunder had been Jim's gift to Emma after Linda's funeral. A 4-year-old Brahman bull with intelligent eyes and unwavering loyalty. Initially skeptical neighbors had quickly learned that despite his massive 850-pound frame, Thunder possessed the gentleness of a lamb around children, especially Emma. Professionally trained as a service animal for trauma recovery, Thunder understood commands and could sense Emma's nightmares before they fully manifested. He slept near her bedroom window every night, a warm, protective presence when Jim was deployed overseas. For Emma, Thunder bridged the impossible gap between life before and after her mother's death. When words failed her, Thunder's steady presence communicated what therapy couldn't reach: unconditional love and security in a world that had proven itself capable of sudden, devastating loss. With Thunder's companionship, Emma had slowly begun to speak again, to smile occasionally, to exist beyond her grief. Cedar Valley, Texas, wrapped itself around its residents like a comfortable embrace, its rolling hills dotted with cattle ranches transitioning gradually into neat suburban developments. The Williams family's 5-acre property sat at this intersection of rural heritage and modern progress, where Thunder could roam freely while Emma attended the local elementary school just minutes away. The October morning wrapped Cedar Valley in golden light as Emma clipped Thunder's lead rope to his halter. Jim had been deployed for 6 weeks now. One of his longer missions and their daily walks had become Emma's anchor, a ritual that kept her connected to the rhythms of ordinary life while her father was away. Today, she wore her NASA t-shirt, a gift from Jim, who understood her dreams of someday working in mission control. Thunder stood patiently as she double-checked his halter, his massive tail swishing gentle arcs across the barn floor. "We'll be back before lunch, Aunt Sarah," Emma called. Her aunt, absorbed in legal briefs at the kitchen table, looked up and smiled. Sarah stayed with Emma during Jim's deployments, her own apartment just 20 minutes away in downtown Cedar Valley. "Stay on the main path," Sarah reminded her, "and be back before noon. I'm making your favorite grilled cheese sandwiches." Outside, the neighborhood gleamed with October sunshine. Manicured lawns stretched between spacious homes, luxury vehicles sat in circular driveways, and children's toys dotted yards like colorful confetti. The Williams house, while comfortable, was modest by Cedar Valley standards. Emma had already learned which neighbors smiled at her and Thunder, and which ones averted their eyes when the unusual pair approached. Mrs. Dorothy McReynolds, 82 and sharp as a tack, waved from her porch. "Looking handsome today, Thunder," she called. Emma waved back, appreciating how the elderly woman always acknowledged Thunder first, understanding instinctively that the bull was Emma's bridge to communication with the world. They followed their usual route past the community park where younger children played under watchful supervision. Thunder walked precisely at Emma's left side, matching her pace, occasionally glancing down to check her expression. His presence beside her kept the whispered comments and curious stares at bay. People were less likely to approach a child accompanied by an 800-pound Brahman bull, even one as well-behaved as Thunder. Near the 2-mile marker of their walk, a police cruiser rolled slowly alongside them. Emma noticed immediately. Her father had taught her situational awareness from an early age. She kept walking, her pace steady, Thunder's lead rope loose in her hand. The cruiser passed them, then abruptly pulled over and parked. 2 officers emerged, and Emma felt the first flutter of unease. "Good morning," said the older officer, his name badge reading Bradley. "You live around here?" His tone was casual, but his eyes were assessing, cataloging details about Emma and Thunder with uncomfortable intensity. "Yes, sir," Emma answered, her voice soft but clear. Jim had taught her to be respectful to authorities while maintaining her dignity. "On Riverside Drive?" "My father and I moved here 2 years ago." Bradley exchanged a glance with his partner, Officer Mitchell, a younger man with close-cropped hair and thin lips that seemed permanently set in disapproval. "Your father home right now?" "He's away on business," Emma replied, omitting details of Jim's deployment as she'd been instructed. "My aunt is staying with me." Mitchell stepped closer, eyeing Thunder with obvious suspicion. "That's a big animal for a little girl. You sure you can control him?" "Thunder is trained, sir. He's not going to cause any trouble." Emma's fingers tightened slightly on the lead rope, not from concern over Thunder's behavior, but from the growing tension she sensed in the interaction. Thunder remained perfectly still beside her, but she could feel his attention shifting toward the officers, his protective instincts quietly activating. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area," Bradley said, his hand resting casually near his holster. "You haven't seen anyone unusual around, have you?" "No, sir." Emma took a small step backward, and Thunder moved with her in perfect synchronization, a movement born of countless hours together. "What's your name, kid?" Mitchell's voice had sharpened, taking on an edge that made Thunder's ears twitch forward. "Emma Williams." She maintained eye contact despite her increasing discomfort. "My father is Colonel James Williams." Neither officer reacted to the military title with the respect Emma was accustomed to seeing. Instead, Mitchell's expression grew more skeptical. "Colonel of what?" "He's in the Army, sir. Special Forces." Emma didn't elaborate further, knowing her father's specific role was classified. Bradley stepped closer, invading her personal space in a way that made Thunder shift position slightly. "You got some ID on you, Miss Williams?" Emma shook her head. "I'm 12, sir. I don't carry ID when I'm walking Thunder." Mitchell snorted dismissively. "Convenient." He moved closer still, and for the first time Thunder issued a low, rumbling sound. Not a moo or a bellow, but a warning that any rancher would recognize as a bull's way of saying, "Back off." "Control your animal," Mitchell snapped, his hand moving toward his weapon. "He is controlled," Emma said, her voice rising slightly with the first edge of real fear. "He's just responding to your tone. If you step back, he'll relax." Instead of retreating, Mitchell took another aggressive step forward, his posture deliberately threatening. "I said, control your animal." Thunder didn't charge, didn't lower his massive head in aggression, didn't even bellow. He simply shifted his 850-pound frame 2 careful steps toward Emma as her breathing became labored, his trained response to her escalating panic attack. The gentle giant positioned himself slightly in front of his beloved girl, creating a protective barrier while lowering his great head to nuzzle her shoulder with the tenderness that had helped her survive 3 years of grief. "He's attacking!" Mitchell shouted, drawing his service weapon in one fluid motion despite the clear evidence of Thunder's calm, deliberate movements. "No!" Emma screamed, her voice tearing through the morning air as she tried to step between Thunder and the gun. "He's helping me. Please don't hurt him." Mrs. McReynolds had witnessed everything from her front porch. Her arthritic fingers fumbled with her phone as she speed-dialed a number she'd memorized for emergencies. Not 911, but a direct line to the military liaison office that her grandson had given her years ago. "This is Dorothy McReynolds in Cedar Valley," she said urgently. "I need to reach Colonel Williams immediately. They're about to shoot his daughter's service animal." The gunshot cracked the suburban afternoon like thunder from a clear sky. Thunder bellowed once, a sound of confusion and pain rather than aggression, and staggered sideways before his massive legs buckled. Emma dropped to her knees beside him, her small hands desperately pressing against the spreading crimson stain on his black coat. "Thunder, no! Please, Thunder, stay with me!" Blood seeped between her fingers as Thunder's intelligent brown eyes found hers, confusion and hurt evident in their depths. His breathing grew shallow, but even dying, he tried to lift his great head toward Emma's voice. Officer Bradley stood back, surveying the scene with clinical detachment. "The animal was aggressive, Mitchell. It was charging toward the child." "You saw it," Mitchell insisted, holstering his weapon with practiced indifference. "That bull was about to trample her. I had to take the shot." Emma looked up at them through tears, her young face transformed by a grief and rage no child should know. "He wasn't attacking. He was protecting me. You killed him for trying to help me." Her voice broke on the words as Thunder's breathing became more labored. "Step away from the animal, miss," Bradley ordered, reaching for Emma's arm. She jerked away from him violently. "Don't touch me. Help him. Please, you have to help him." But even as she pleaded, Thunder's massive form was growing still. His tail, which had always wagged gently when he saw Emma, gave one final weak thump against the pavement. The light in Thunder's eyes dimmed as Emma's world collapsed into a singularity of loss. "He's dead," she whispered, her voice hollow with disbelief. "You killed him." She looked up at the officers, tears falling freely onto Thunder's still warm hide. "My daddy is going to make you pay for this." Mitchell laughed, a short, dismissive sound that cut through Emma's grief like glass. "Is that a threat, little girl?" "No," Emma said, her voice gaining strength even as her heart shattered. "It's a promise." More neighbors had emerged from their homes, drawn by the gunshot and Emma's screams. Several had phones raised, recording the aftermath of the shooting. Mrs. McReynolds approached despite the officer's orders to stay back, her elderly frame trembling with righteous indignation. "That animal was gentle as a lamb," she declared, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "I've watched him with Emma for 2 years. He never showed aggression to anyone, ever." "Ma'am, this is police business," Bradley said dismissively. "Please return to your residence." "I've already called his father," Mrs. McReynolds replied defiantly, clutching her phone. "Colonel Williams is Delta Force. He's going to want answers for why you murdered his daughter's service animal." Mitchell's face flushed slightly, but his belligerence didn't waver. Military or not, he needs to teach his kid better respect for authority. And that wasn't a service animal. It was dangerous livestock. Thunder was certified. Emma's voice rose to near hysteria. "He had papers. He was trained to help me when I get scared. He was good and gentle, and he loved me." Her small body shook with sobs as she cradled Thunder's massive head in her lap. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Ambulance, not police, backup. Someone had called for medical assistance for the traumatized child. As paramedics approached, Emma refused to move away from Thunder's body. "I can't leave him," she whispered to the EMT, trying to examine her. "He'll be scared if I leave him alone." "Honey," the paramedic said gently, "we need to check if you're hurt. And your friend isn't scared anymore. He's at peace now." It took 3 adults to gently separate Emma from Thunder's body. As they loaded her into the ambulance for shock treatment, her screams echoed through Cedar Valley, a sound that would haunt the neighbors who witnessed the shooting for years to come. Officer Mitchell began writing his report before the ambulance was out of sight. Subject: destruction of dangerous livestock threatening civilian safety. Bull charged at officers and minor child. Lethal force necessary to prevent injuries or fatalities. Bradley nodded approvingly. "Clean shooting, Mitchell." Textbook response to animal attack. Neither officer mentioned Thunder's gentle approach to comfort Emma. Neither recorded her explanation of his service animal training. Neither acknowledged the witnesses who testified to Thunder's peaceful nature. By noon, the official story was filed. A dangerous bull had threatened a child and been neutralized by quick-thinking officers. The blood on Maple Street was hosed away by city maintenance. Thunder's body was removed by animal control services. All that remained was an empty halter on the pavement and the promise of a 12-year-old girl whose father possessed skills that went far beyond what small-town police officers could imagine. 6,000 miles away, in a classified location, Colonel James Williams received an encrypted message that would change everything. Thunder down, Emma safe but traumatized. Immediate extraction recommended. The hunter was coming home. 3 days later, Colonel James Williams stepped off a military transport plane at Bergstrom Air Force Base, his face carved from granite. He had been extracted from his classified mission the moment Mrs. McReynolds' emergency call reached his commanding officers through proper military channels. The urgency of the situation was apparent even through official communications. A decorated Delta Force operative's family had been attacked on American soil. Jim had not spoken more than necessary words during the 36-hour journey home, his mind consumed with a single purpose: reaching his daughter. The brief military report he'd received contained clinical facts that barely scratched the surface of Emma's trauma. Service animal killed by local police. Child hospitalized for shock. Investigation pending. But those sterile phrases couldn't convey the true horror, that his 12-year-old daughter had watched her beloved Thunder die in her arms. When Jim walked through the door of their Cedar Valley home, Emma was sitting motionless on the living room couch, staring at nothing. She had not spoken above a whisper since leaving the hospital, according to Sarah. The child psychologist Sarah had consulted diagnosed acute traumatic stress disorder, recommending immediate intensive therapy. "Emma," Jim said softly, his voice gentle despite the rage building behind his eyes. She turned slowly, and when she saw him, something broke open in her face. She launched herself into his arms with a raw, wounded sound that was more animal than human, a sound that reminded him terrifyingly of Thunder's final bellow. Jim lifted her easily, holding her against his chest as she sobbed for the first time since Thunder had died. "I couldn't save him, Daddy," she choked out between gasps. "I tried to stop the bleeding like you taught me, but I couldn't make it stop." There was so much blood, and he kept looking at me like he didn't understand why they hurt him. Jim's eyes met Sarah's over Emma's head, and his sister saw something there that made her blood run cold. A calm, calculated fury that she recognized from their childhood. It was the look he'd had the night he put 3 neighborhood bullies in the hospital for attacking her when she was 14. "I should have protected him better," Emma continued, her words tumbling out now that the dam had broken. "Maybe if I hadn't gotten scared. Maybe if I'd been braver." "This wasn't your fault," Jim said firmly, his voice gentle with her even as murderous thoughts filled his mind. "Thunder did exactly what he was supposed to do. He protected you. The policemen were wrong, Emma. What they did was evil, and they're going to pay for it." That night, after Emma had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep, Jim sat in the dark kitchen with Sarah. His sister pushed a thick folder across the table to him without preamble. "Internal affairs cleared them both," she said, her voice bitter with professional disappointment. "Justified use of force. They're claiming Thunder lunged at Mitchell." Jim's expression didn't change as he opened the folder. "The videos? Apparently inconclusive. The department is protecting its own." Sarah's frustration was evident in every line of her posture. "I'm filing a civil suit, but Jim, that won't be enough. Not for what they did to Emma." "No," Jim agreed quietly, standing to walk to the window. Outside he could see the empty pasture where Thunder used to graze, the vacant barn that still held the bull's scent and memories. It won't be enough. The following morning, Jim began his reconnaissance. His military training had prepared him for patient, methodical intelligence gathering, and he applied those skills to Cedar Valley with surgical precision. He established the officers' patrol patterns, their preferred lunch spots, their off-duty haunts. Bradley lived in a modest ranch house with his wife and teenage son. Mitchell, divorced twice, occupied a sparsely furnished apartment and spent most evenings at Murphy's Tavern. Both men operated with the casual confidence of those who had never faced consequences for their actions. Jim documented everything, installing discreet cameras around his property in preparation for the inevitable moment when the officers would return. He knew men like Bradley and Mitchell couldn't resist the urge to intimidate, to reassert their dominance. They would come, and when they did, he would be ready. A week into his surveillance, Jim's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Williams?" he answered, his voice neutral. "Colonel Williams?" The male voice on the other end was hesitant, young. "This is Officer Lisa Chen. I was there the day your daughter's bull was shot." Jim's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want, Officer Chen?" "To talk. In person." Chen's voice dropped lower. "What happened to your daughter wasn't right. The report, it's not what actually happened. I didn't say anything then, and I've been having trouble living with myself. Why tell me this? Why not report it through proper channels? Chen's laugh was bitter. I tried. My sergeant told me to remember where my loyalty should lie if I wanted to keep my job. Look, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I can't sleep knowing what I saw and what's in that official report. Jim considered the possibilities. A trap, a genuine crisis of conscience, a test. 4 o'clock, the coffee shop on Main Street. Come alone and in civilian clothes. At 4 o'clock, Jim sat at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. Officer Chen entered precisely on time, dressed in jeans and a button-down shirt, looking younger and more vulnerable out of uniform. She spotted Jim immediately. There weren't many publicly available photos of him from his classified career, but she had clearly done her homework. "Colonel Williams," Chen said, sliding into the seat across from him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her posture tense with obvious stress. Jim studied her carefully. "You're taking a significant risk, Officer Chen." "I know," Chen replied, her hands fidgeting with a paper napkin. "But I can't live with what I saw. Every time I close my eyes, I see your daughter's face when that bull went down. I see the way Bradley and Mitchell treated her afterward. Tell me what really happened." Chen's account matched the neighbors' videos, but added crucial details that had been omitted from the official report. There had been no call about suspicious activity. Bradley had spotted Emma and deliberately pulled over. Thunder had never lunged, had never shown aggression. The bull had simply shifted his weight, positioning himself between Emma and the officers in a protective stance rather than an aggressive one. "Mitchell has issues with large animals," Chen explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Got trampled by a horse when he was a rookie. But this wasn't about fear. He wasn't afraid of Thunder. He was—" She struggled for the word. "Angry," Jim supplied. Chen nodded miserably. Angry that a black family had moved into his patrol area with what he called farm animals. Angry that your daughter had the audacity to walk a bull through a nice neighborhood. Those were his words, Colonel. His exact words. And you signed off on the false report. Yeah. Chen couldn't meet his eyes. I did. I was scared for my job, scared of what would happen if I went against senior officers. But then I found out about Thunder, that he was specially trained, that Emma had lost her mother. Then I saw her at the hospital. Chen finally looked up. I became a cop to help people, not to terrorize children and kill their pets. What are you offering, Officer Chen? Information. And when the time comes, testimony. I'll go on record about what really happened, no matter what it costs me. Jim studied the young officer, seeing genuine remorse and determination in her eyes. You're willing to throw away your career? What career? Chen's laugh was hollow. Being complicit in covering up the murder of a child service animal? That's not police work, that's just thuggery with badges. As Chen spoke, Jim's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Emergency. Call me now. After Chen left with promises to provide additional evidence, Jim called his sister immediately. What's the emergency? I just got off the phone with the district attorney's office, Sarah said, her voice tight with controlled rage. They're not pursuing charges against Bradley or Mitchell. Insufficient evidence to contradict the officer's account of events. We have multiple videos, Jim said evenly. None that capture the exact moment Mitchell claims Thunder lunged, and apparently the word of 3 police officers outweighs the testimony of an elderly woman and a traumatized child. The frustration in Sarah's voice was palpable. I'm not giving up on the civil case, but criminal charges are off the table. I see. Jim ended the call, his decision crystallizing like ice forming on a winter pond. The legal system had failed, as he'd known it would. The time for patience and proper channels had passed. Thunder's blood demanded justice, and Emma's shattered innocence required protection that the courts couldn't provide. That evening, Jim watched from his parked car as Officer Mitchell exited Murphy's Tavern alone. Bradley had left an hour earlier, visibly intoxicated despite being scheduled for patrol the following morning. Mitchell had stayed, nursing a single beer while watching the baseball game, twirling his keys around his finger as he headed for his car in the dimly lit parking lot behind the building. Jim moved silently, intercepting Mitchell just as he reached for his car door. "Officer Mitchell." Mitchell turned, startled but quickly recovering. Recognition dawned in his eyes. "You're the kid's father." "Colonel Williams." "Yes." Mitchell's posture shifted, becoming defensive. His hand drifted toward his hip where his off-duty weapon would be holstered. "This is harassment, you know. I could arrest you right now." "You could try," Jim replied, his voice deadly calm. "But then we'd have to see which one of us is better trained." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Mitchell's face. For the first time, he seemed to grasp that he was facing someone far more dangerous than an angry civilian father. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something," Jim said, stepping closer and invading the officer's personal space. "My daughter hasn't spoken above a whisper since you killed her bull. She's 12 years old, and she's already learned that the people who are supposed to protect her will harm her without consequence. Look, that animal was dangerous." Jim moved with frightening speed, his fist connecting with Mitchell's solar plexus. The officer doubled over, gasping for breath, too shocked to reach for his weapon. Jim grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the car with controlled violence. "Thunder was a trained service animal who saved my daughter's life after her mother died," Jim said, his voice still calm despite the violence of his actions. "He was not dangerous. He was protective. There's a difference that any competent officer should recognize." Mitchell struggled, but Jim had been trained by the best. He pinned the officer against the vehicle with minimal effort. "You have a choice to make, Mitchell. You can either come clean about what really happened, or you can experience firsthand what it feels like to be genuinely afraid for your life." "You're threatening a police officer," Mitchell gasped. "That's a felony." "No," Jim corrected him. "I'm promising a corrupt man that his actions have consequences. The badge doesn't make you immune." He released Mitchell, stepping back. The officer slumped against the car, his face contorted with a mixture of fear and rage. "You're dead, Williams. You don't know who you're messing with." "Actually, I do," Jim said, straightening his jacket. "A bully with a badge who's never faced a fair fight." He turned to walk away, then paused. "Consider this a warning. Stay away from my daughter, stay away from my home, and start considering a career change. Because one way or another you and Bradley are finished in this town." As Jim disappeared into the shadows, Mitchell called after him, "You think you're untouchable because you're some kind of military hotshot. The system works differently here. We protect our own." Jim's voice drifted back through the darkness. "So do I, Officer Mitchell. So do I." The confrontation with Mitchell had precisely the effect Jim anticipated. Within days, both officers became jumpy on patrol, constantly looking over their shoulders. Bradley attempted to mask his unease by becoming more aggressive during stops, as if trying to prove he wasn't intimidated. Mitchell started drinking heavily, his hands shaking slightly during routine interactions. Jim continued his surveillance, documenting the escalating pattern of misconduct that fear was driving them toward. Officer Chen provided internal records showing that complaints against both men had increased dramatically since Thunder's shooting. 2 weeks after his parking lot encounter with Mitchell, Jim received a call from Dr. Foster, Emma's therapist. "Colonel Williams, I'm deeply concerned about Emma's progress. She's developed an intense fear of police officers and loud noises. She's showing severe symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder that are actually worsening rather than improving." Jim watched through the window as Emma sat on the porch swing, staring at the spot in the pasture where Thunder used to graze in the afternoon sun. She hadn't been the same since the shooting, barely eating, speaking only in whispers, jumping at every unexpected sound. "What can I do?" Jim asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "She needs stability and security right now, and some way to process her grief for Thunder. Have you considered getting another service animal?" "It's too soon," Jim said firmly. "She's not ready." "Perhaps," Dr. Foster conceded, "but she needs to know that it's possible to love again without betraying Thunder's memory. Think about it, Colonel." After ending the call, Jim joined Emma on the porch. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes before she spoke, her voice barely audible. "Are you going to hurt those policemen, Daddy?" Jim studied his daughter's face, surprised by the directness of her question. "Why do you ask that?" "Because I know how you get when somebody hurts people you love." Her eyes, so like her mother's, were serious beyond her years. "I heard you talking to Aunt Sarah. I know you're very angry." Jim chose his words carefully. "I want those men to understand the consequences of their actions. I want them to face justice for what they did to Thunder." "But what if hurting them doesn't make it better?" Emma asked, her wisdom cutting through his rage like a blade. "What if it just makes more hurt in the world?" Her question pierced through the cold calculation that had driven him since his return. "What do you think would make it better, sweetheart?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I think Thunder would want us to be okay. He wouldn't want us to be sad forever or to do bad things because we're angry." She leaned against her father's arm. "I miss him so much, Daddy. It hurts all the time. But Thunder was good. He wouldn't want badness to come from missing him." That night, after Emma was asleep, Jim reviewed his intelligence on Bradley and Mitchell with new eyes. The pattern was clear. Both officers had escalated their behavior since Thunder's shooting, emboldened by their ability to escape consequences. According to Chen, Bradley had been heard boasting, "That's how you handle troublemakers. Show them who's in charge." Jim's phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "They're planning something tomorrow. Watch your daughter." A friend. He recognized Chen's coded warning immediately. She was risking her career and possibly her safety to provide intelligence, and Jim felt a grudging respect for the young officer's courage. Jim didn't sleep that night. Chen's warning echoed in his mind as he methodically checked and rechecked the security system he had installed throughout the house. Cameras monitored every approach, motion sensors guarded the perimeter, and reinforced locks secured each entry point. These precautions weren't paranoia. They were the calculated response of a man who understood exactly what his adversaries were capable of. By dawn, he had formulated his plan, one that would require perfect timing and flawless execution. Emma wasn't going to school today. "How about we take a day trip instead?" he told her over breakfast, keeping his tone casual despite the gravity of his decision. "There's a science museum in Austin that has a new planetarium exhibit. I think your mother would have loved to see it with you." The mention of Linda was deliberate, a gentle reminder of connections that remained unbroken despite loss. Emma looked up from her untouched cereal, surprise flickering across her face. "But Dr. Foster said I should maintain my routine." "Sometimes it's good to break routine," Jim replied, his eyes constantly scanning the windows and the street beyond. "Besides, I think we both need a change of scenery." Emma nodded slowly, and Jim caught a glimpse of the curious child she had been before trauma dimmed her natural enthusiasm. They left through the back door, avoiding Main Street where a patrol car had already made 3 passes that morning. Jim drove circuitously, ensuring they weren't followed, before delivering Emma to Sarah's colleague's home outside Cedar Valley. Only after his daughter was safely settled did he return to implement the second phase of his plan. The house sat empty, seemingly vulnerable. Jim positioned himself in the property's only blind spot, the area not visible from the street or neighboring homes. Then he waited, his patience honed by countless missions where the difference between success and failure had been measured in heartbeats. At 2:17 p.m., exactly when Chen had indicated their patrol would bring them through the neighborhood, Bradley and Mitchell's cruiser rolled slowly past the Williams residence. Jim observed through high-powered binoculars as Mitchell pointed toward the house, saying something to Bradley that made the older officer nod grimly. The cruiser continued down the street, turned at the corner, and disappeared from view. 15 minutes later, it returned. This time they pulled into Mrs. McReynolds's driveway next door. Both officers exited the vehicle, approaching the elderly woman's front door with deliberate casualness. Jim's jaw tightened as he watched them speaking with his neighbor. Though he couldn't hear the conversation, Mrs. McReynolds's body language told him everything he needed to know, arms crossed, chin raised in the stubborn defiance of a woman who had lived through too much history to be easily intimidated. When Bradley stepped closer, jabbing his finger in the air near her face, Jim nearly broke cover. But Mrs. McReynolds stood her ground, and eventually the officers retreated to their vehicle. They didn't leave, however. The cruiser remained parked at the curb, both men watching the Williams house with predatory intensity. At 4:30 p.m., with the officers still maintaining their surveillance, Jim enacted the next stage of his plan. A call was placed to the precinct from a burner phone reporting a disturbance at a location across town, an address that happened to be in the zone Bradley and Mitchell were responsible for patrolling. Jim watched as the radio call came through, observed Bradley's obvious reluctance to respond, and noted the way Mitchell gestured angrily toward the Williams house before finally putting the cruiser in drive. The moment they were out of sight, Jim moved. He entered his home through the rear entrance, checked that all cameras were operational, and prepared for their return. It wouldn't be long. They would quickly determine the call was false and double back, likely more agitated than before. Sure enough, 43 minutes later, the cruiser screeched to a halt in front of the house. This time there was no pretense of routine patrol. Bradley and Mitchell approached the front door with the purposeful stride of men intent on confrontation. Jim positioned himself in the living room, ostensibly reading a book, The Picture of Innocence. The hidden cameras throughout the property recorded every angle as Mitchell banged on the door with unnecessary force. "Officers," Jim said, opening the door with measured calm. "How can I help you?" Mitchell's face was flushed with barely suppressed rage. "We need to ask you some questions, Williams. Specifically about threats made against police officers." "Is that so?" Jim stepped back, allowing them entry with apparent cooperation. "That sounds serious. What seems to be the problem?" Bradley closed the door behind them, a subtle but unmistakable power move designed to create a sense of isolation and intimidation. "We've received reports of threatening behavior, Williams. Specifically, threats made against Officer Mitchell here." "I'm not sure what you're referring to," Jim replied mildly, noting the way Mitchell's hand hovered near his service weapon. "I've been rather preoccupied caring for my traumatized daughter." "The same daughter who threatened us?" Bradley asked, his voice deceptively soft. "The one who said her daddy would make us pay?" Jim's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a darkness, a warning that both officers were too arrogant to recognize. "My daughter was distraught after watching her service animal die in her arms." "I wouldn't put too much stock in anything she said in that moment." Mitchell stepped closer, his body language aggressive and confrontational. "Where is she now?" "Not here," Jim said simply. "Convenient," Bradley muttered, moving further into the house and inspecting family photographs on the wall with exaggerated interest. "Nice place. Seems like a lot of house for a guy raising a kid alone. Military pay that good these days?" Jim recognized the tactic, provocation designed to elicit an emotional response that would justify escalation. He didn't take the bait, maintaining his composure even as rage built beneath the surface. "I've been fortunate in my career," he replied evenly. Mitchell circled behind him, a flanking maneuver that would have been subtle to someone without tactical training. "You know, we've been looking into you, Williams. Delta Force, right? A lot of classified missions, a lot of violence. Makes a man unstable, doesn't it?" "PTSD, anger issues?" "I'm in excellent mental health, thank you," Jim replied, turning slightly to keep both officers in his peripheral vision. "My military record is exemplary." "Yeah, well, sometimes the most dangerous ones seem perfectly normal on the surface," Bradley said, picking up a framed photo of Emma with Thunder. "Shame about the bull. But you military types understand collateral damage, right?" The deliberate cruelty of the statement was calculated to break Jim's control. A muscle twitched in his jaw, but he maintained his composure, knowing the cameras were recording every word, every gesture. "I understand the difference between necessary force and abuse of power, if that's what you're asking." Mitchell moved suddenly, knocking a book from Jim's hand with deliberate aggression. "You threatening us, Williams?" "Not at all," Jim said, bending slowly to retrieve the book, every movement controlled and non-threatening. "I'm simply having a conversation with two officers who entered my home of their own accord." "With your permission," Bradley pointed out smugly. "So I did," Jim acknowledged, though his tone suggested he was beginning to question the wisdom of that decision. "Though I'm starting to wonder if this visit serves any legitimate law enforcement purpose." Mitchell's patience finally snapped. He grabbed Jim by the shoulder, spinning him around with unnecessary force. "Listen, you arrogant son of a—" Jim moved with controlled precision, breaking the hold with a simple redirecting movement that sent Mitchell stumbling back a step. It was a defensive technique, nothing more, but it demonstrated capabilities that clearly unsettled both officers. "Please don't put your hands on me, officer," Jim said evenly, straightening his shirt. "I'm not resisting and I'm not threatening you." "Or what?" Mitchell's face contorted with rage as he recovered his balance. "You'll attack a police officer." Give me a reason, Williams. Just one reason." "I think you should leave now," Jim said calmly. "If you have questions, you can direct them to my attorney." But Mitchell was beyond reason now, his control shattered by the humiliation of being so easily handled. "Your daughter made a serious accusation, Williams. Said you'd make us pay. Now you're following us, confronting officers, making veiled threats." "I haven't threatened anyone," Jim corrected, aware that every word was being recorded for posterity. "And I certainly haven't been following you." "Liar!" Mitchell lunged forward, grabbing Jim's collar with both hands and slamming him against the wall with enough force to rattle the picture frames. Jim could have disabled Mitchell in at least 7 different ways from this position, but he restrained himself, allowing the officer to maintain his hold while clearly stating for the cameras, "I'm not resisting, I'm unarmed, and I'm not threatening you in any way." "Please remove your hands." "Shut up!" Mitchell snarled, slamming Jim against the wall again. "You think you're better than us? Think you can come into our town and tell us how to do our jobs?" Bradley stood back, making no move to restrain his partner, complicit in the assault through his inaction. "You should have taught your daughter better manners, Williams," Bradley said coldly. "Kids need to learn respect for authority." "Respect is earned," Jim replied, still making no move to defend himself despite the violence being inflicted upon him. "Authority without accountability is just tyranny." Mitchell's control shattered completely. His fist connected with Jim's midsection, driving the air from his lungs with brutal force. "That's for threatening my partner." Jim doubled over, not entirely feigning the pain. Mitchell was strong, his rage lending additional power to the blow. But Jim had endured far worse in service to his country, and his training allowed him to absorb the punishment while maintaining his strategic objective. "I haven't threatened anyone," he gasped, each word clearly audible to the recording devices hidden throughout the room. "Oh no?" Mitchell grabbed him by the hair, yanking his head up with vicious satisfaction. "What do you call what happened in that parking lot? What do you call following us on patrol?" Jim said nothing, allowing Mitchell's words to incriminate themselves on the recording. Each admission, each detail about their previous encounters, was building an unshakable case for harassment and retaliation. Bradley finally stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on his partner's shoulder as he noticed more neighbors gathering outside, drawn by the sounds of confrontation. "That's enough, Mitchell." "The hell it is," Mitchell snarled, landing another blow to Jim's ribs. "He needs to understand how things work around here. And you need to understand that actions have consequences," Jim said quietly, straightening despite the pain. Something in his tone, the absolute certainty behind the words, penetrated Mitchell's rage. He hesitated, suddenly aware of a shift in the room's atmosphere. "Is that a threat?" Bradley demanded, his own confidence faltering for the first time. "No," Jim replied, his voice perfectly calm despite the assault he'd just endured. "It's a fact." The truth hung in the air between them like a blade. Both officers suddenly realized they had been maneuvered into exactly the position Jim had wanted them in. Recorded assaulting an unarmed civilian in his own home, making admissions that contradicted their official reports, and demonstrating the very corruption and abuse of power that would soon destroy their careers. "I think we're done here," Jim said evenly, "unless you'd like to continue assaulting an unarmed civilian in his own home. Perhaps add a few more charges to the growing list." As they moved toward the door, Jim spoke one last time, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had faced down terrorists and warlords. "Officers, the next time you decide to terrorize a child or kill a beloved pet, you might want to check who that child's father is first." The door slammed behind them with enough force to rattle the windows, but Jim was already moving to his computer. The footage was perfect, crystal clear audio and video from multiple angles, capturing every moment of the assault and every incriminating word. With methodical precision, he made copies, created secure backups, and then sent the first file to Sarah with a simple message: "It's done." The trap had been set, the bait taken, and the prey had condemned themselves with their own actions. Now it was simply a matter of watching them unravel as the full weight of federal justice descended upon their corrupt little kingdom. The retaliation came swifter than Jim had anticipated. At precisely 9:15 the following morning, the doorbell rang with the insistent chime of official business. Jim, who had been awake since dawn reviewing the evidence package he'd prepared, opened the door to find two unfamiliar individuals on his porch, a woman in a crisp business suit and a man with a clipboard and government-issued identification. "Colonel Williams?" The woman extended her hand with practiced authority. "I'm Diane Mercer with the Department of Child and Family Services. This is my colleague Anthony Wells. We need to speak with you regarding your daughter Emma." Jim's expression remained neutral, though inwardly a cold realization settled over him. This was Bradley and Mitchell's counterstrike, their attempt to use the system against him just as he had used it against them. It was predictable yet devastatingly effective. "Of course," he said, stepping aside to allow them entry. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "We've received a report expressing concern about Emma's well-being," Ms. Mercer explained as they settled in the living room, the same room where Bradley and Mitchell had assaulted him less than 24 hours earlier. "Standard procedure requires us to investigate any such reports, particularly when they involve allegations of an unstable home environment." "I see." Jim's voice remained calm, though his military training immediately activated, assessing threats and calculating responses. "And who filed this report?" "I'm not at liberty to disclose that information," Ms. Mercer replied, though her slight glance at her colleague spoke volumes. "The report suggests concerns about your mental health, Colonel Williams. Specifically, allegations of PTSD-related aggression and potentially endangering your daughter through pursuing a personal vendetta against local law enforcement. So they had moved quickly, attempting to weaponize the very system designed to protect children against the child they had already traumatized. It was a calculated move that demonstrated just how deep the corruption ran in Cedar Valley's institutions. "My daughter is currently at school," Jim stated factually. "She's been attending regularly, except for therapeutic absences following the traumatic incident with her service animal. Her psychologist, Dr. Foster, can verify her psychological state and our ongoing work to address her trauma." Mr. Wells made notes on his clipboard with obvious disapproval. "We'll need to speak with Emma directly, as well as review her school records and medical history. We'll also require a comprehensive evaluation of the home environment." "I understand procedure," Jim replied. "However, given the timing of this report, I believe it constitutes harassment and retaliation by Officers Bradley and Mitchell, who are currently under investigation themselves for misconduct. My attorney should be present for any further discussions." Ms. Mercer's expression tightened with bureaucratic authority. "Colonel Williams, obstruction of a DCFS investigation can result in immediate temporary removal of the child from the home." The threat hung in the air between them, intentional and heavy. Jim had faced down warlords and terrorists with less calculation in their eyes than Ms. Mercer displayed now. The system, it seemed, was circling its wagons to protect itself from exposure. "I'm not obstructing anything," Jim replied evenly. "I'm requesting appropriate legal representation, which is my right. Additionally, I'm documenting this visit and your threats regarding my daughter's custody, as they appear to be directly connected to my filing of misconduct charges against Officers Bradley and Mitchell." The visit concluded 20 minutes later with a scheduled follow-up interview that would include Emma, Dr. Foster, and Jim's attorney. As their car pulled away, Jim immediately called Sarah. "They're going after Emma," he said without preamble. "DCFS just left. They're threatening custody evaluation based on a credible report about my mental stability." Sarah's sharp intake of breath was followed by a string of legal terminology that outlined exactly how problematic this development was. "This is textbook retaliation, but it's effective. Family court operates under different standards of evidence than criminal court. The best interest of the child standard means they could potentially remove Emma pending investigation, even without concrete evidence of abuse or neglect." "They won't take my daughter," Jim stated, the calm in his voice belying the storm beneath. "Jim," Sarah's tone held a warning, "whatever you're thinking, stop. This is exactly what they want, to provoke you into something that would justify their claims. We need to handle this properly, through the legal system." "The same legal system that cleared them of killing Thunder?" Jim's control slipped slightly. "The same system they're now using to threaten my family? This isn't collateral damage, Sarah. This is my daughter." Before Sarah could respond, Jim's phone beeped with another call. The caller ID showed Emma's school. "Hayes," he answered, his stomach tightening with dread. "Colonel Williams, this is Principal Whitaker. I need you to come to the school immediately." "There's been an incident involving Emma." Jim arrived at Riverside Elementary in record time, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. He found Emma sitting outside the principal's office, her small frame curled inward, eyes fixed on the floor with the vacant stare he'd seen too often in combat zones. She looked up as he approached, and the fear in her expression cut through him like a blade. "Daddy," she whispered, rising to throw her arms around his waist. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble." "What happened, sweetheart?" Jim knelt to her level, noting the tear tracks on her cheeks and the way her hands trembled. Before she could answer, Principal Whitaker appeared in the doorway of her office. "Colonel Williams, please come in. Emma, you wait here." Inside the office, Jim found Dr. Foster already present, along with the school counselor. Principal Whitaker, a stern woman in her 50s, gestured for him to sit. "Colonel Williams, we had a concerning situation today. Officers Bradley and Mitchell arrived at the school this morning requesting to speak with Emma regarding an ongoing investigation. They claim to have proper authorization." Jim's blood ran cold. "They what?" "Fortunately," Principal Whitaker continued, "our policy requires parental notification before any student is interviewed by law enforcement. When I called to inform you, the officers became increasingly insistent. Emma overheard the confrontation and experienced what Dr. Foster believes was a severe panic attack." Dr. Foster nodded grimly. Emma displayed classic symptoms of acute anxiety triggered by the officer's presence. She was found hiding under a desk in the library. According to the librarian, when Officer Mitchell approached, Emma began screaming uncontrollably. Jim's hands clenched into fists as the full scope of their cruelty became clear. They weren't just retaliating against him, they were deliberately re-traumatizing a 12-year-old child who had already suffered more than any child should endure. "Where are they now?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. "After I insisted they leave school property, they complied, though reluctantly," Principal Whitaker replied. "However, they indicated they would return with proper documentation to interview Emma regarding threats allegedly made against them." "This is harassment," Jim stated flatly. "They're retaliating because I've filed formal complaints about their conduct in shooting Emma's service animal." Principal Whitaker's expression softened slightly. "Colonel Williams, I'm aware of what happened to Thunder. The entire staff has been briefed on Emma's situation and her current emotional vulnerability. I assure you, we did not and would not allow those officers access to your daughter without your explicit permission." When they emerged from the office, Emma was exactly where they'd left her, small and withdrawn in the oversized chair. She looked up at Jim with eyes that held a question she was afraid to ask. "We're going home, sweetheart," he said gently, extending his hand. In the car, Emma's silence weighed heavily between them. Finally, as they turned onto their street, she spoke in a voice so small it was barely audible. "They said they were going to take me away from you." Jim's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Who said that, Emma?" "The policeman. They were talking outside the principal's office. They didn't know I could hear them." Emma's voice wavered with the terror only a child who had already lost one parent could understand. "Officer Mitchell said if you wouldn't back off, they'd make sure I went into foster care. He said no judge would let a mentally unstable veteran keep custody." The calculated cruelty of using a child's greatest fear against her, separation from her remaining parent, ignited something primitive and protective in Jim that went beyond military training or tactical planning. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. "Emma, look at me." She turned, her eyes filled with the kind of fear that could scar a child for life. "No one is taking you away from me. Those men are trying to scare us because they did something wrong and they don't want to face the consequences. But I promise you, sweetheart, I will never let anyone separate us. Never." As they pulled into their driveway, Jim noticed an unmarked police cruiser parked down the street. They were watching, waiting for him to make a mistake, to give them the ammunition they needed to destroy his family, just as they had destroyed Thunder. In that moment, Jim faced the most difficult tactical decision of his career. Continue his campaign against Bradley and Mitchell, potentially risking custody of Emma, or back down and allow the corrupt officers to escape consequences while his daughter lived in fear. The choice crystallized as Emma's small hand slipped into his, seeking the reassurance he'd never failed to provide. Some battles could not be won through direct confrontation. Some required a different approach entirely, one that would ensure not just justice for Thunder but safety for Emma and every other child these men might target. The hunter was about to become the protector, and Cedar Valley was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who has everything to lose and nothing left to fear. The hidden connection that would shatter everything emerged 3 days later, buried deep in police files that Sarah had obtained through her legal discovery process. She had been reviewing accident reports, looking for patterns of misconduct, when a detail in a 3-year-old incident report made her blood freeze. "Jim," she called, her voice tight with controlled shock. "You need to see this, now." Jim found his sister in her makeshift office, surrounded by bankers' boxes of evidence, her face pale as she held a single document with trembling hands. "What is it?" "Linda's accident report," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been cross-referencing officer names from recent complaints with historical incidents, looking for patterns of abuse. Jim, Officer Derek Mitchell was the responding officer to Linda's accident." The document felt heavy in Jim's hands as he read the clinical details of that terrible night 3 years ago. Vehicle hydroplane during severe thunderstorm. Driver lost control, struck guardrail, vehicle rolled multiple times. Driver pronounced dead at scene. Passenger, minor child, transported to hospital with minor injuries. But it was the officer's narrative that revealed the horrifying truth. Upon arrival, observed severely damaged vehicle with deceased adult female driver. Minor passenger conscious but disoriented. No other vehicles involved in single car accident. Rain and poor visibility likely contributing factors. Single car accident, Jim said slowly, his mind processing the implications. But the tire marks, the damage patterns, I always thought something was wrong about that report. Sarah pulled out another document, an internal affairs file she'd fought for weeks to obtain. Mitchell was under investigation at the time of Linda's accident. Excessive force complaints, drinking on duty, unreported vehicle damage to his patrol car. Look at the date. His car was in the shop for minor collision repairs the day after Linda died. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Jim's hands shook as he reached for his phone, speed-dialing Mrs. McReynolds. If anyone had seen something that night, it would be the elderly woman who kept vigilant watch over their neighborhood. "Mrs. McReynolds, this is Jim Williams. I need to ask you about the night Linda died, the accident. Do you remember seeing anything unusual?" The old woman's voice was crisp, despite her age. "I remember that night like yesterday, Colonel. Terrible storm. But I was up late watching the Late Show. I saw your wife's car being followed by a police cruiser. Thought it was strange at the time. Officers don't usually follow cars unless there's a problem." Jim's grip tightened on the phone. "Followed how?" "Close behind, almost bumper to bumper in that rain. Then I heard the crash, saw the police lights. But when I looked out again, there was only one car at the scene. I figured the officer must have called for backup and left to direct traffic or something." "Did you tell anyone about this at the time?" "I mentioned it to Detective Harrison when he came by asking questions, but he said I was probably confused by the storm and the lights. Said grief sometimes makes people see things that aren't there." Mrs. McReynolds paused. "Colonel, is there something wrong? Something I should have insisted on?" "Mrs. McReynolds, you may have just provided the missing piece to a puzzle we've been trying to solve. Thank you." Jim hung up and turned to Sarah, his face carved from stone. "Mitchell killed Linda. He forced her off the road and left Emma at the scene to die." Sarah was already pulling additional files. "There's more, Jim. I've been analyzing Mitchell's patrol patterns over the past 3 years. He's been systematically monitoring Emma's activities, school events, therapy appointments, even her walks with Thunder. He's documented her growing memory recovery in his personal logs." She spread out a series of reports and photographs. "Look at this, Mitchell's private notes about Emma's therapy progress. He was tracking whether she was recovering memories from the accident. He was terrified she would eventually remember enough to identify him as the driver who killed her mother." The psychological evaluation reports painted an even more chilling picture. Dr. Foster's notes, which Mitchell had somehow accessed through police channels, detailed Emma's gradual memory recovery and her occasional references to the bad policeman during therapy sessions. Thunder's shooting wasn't random harassment, Jim realized, his voice hollow with the magnitude of the revelation. Mitchell was eliminating witnesses. Emma was getting close to remembering details that could implicate him, so he killed the one thing that made her feel safe, hoping to traumatize her back into silence. Sarah nodded grimly. It gets worse. According to these financial records, Mitchell has been paying a private investigator to monitor Emma's therapy sessions and school performance. He's been obsessively tracking her psychological development, waiting for signs that she might become a credible threat to his freedom. The federal prosecutor's office received Sarah's emergency filing at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, FBI Special Agent Martinez was sitting in Jim's living room, reviewing evidence that transformed a civil rights violation case into a capital murder investigation. "Colonel Williams," Agent Martinez said, his expression grave as he studied the accident reconstruction photos alongside Mitchell's surveillance logs. "What we're looking at here is premeditated murder followed by 3 years of systematic stalking and witness intimidation. This is no longer about police misconduct. This is about a killer who's been hunting your daughter." The FBI's forensic analysis of Linda's accident scene revealed what local investigators had missed or ignored 3 years earlier. Paint transfer on Linda's vehicle matched the color and composition of Cedar Valley police cruisers. Tire marks at the scene showed evidence of a second vehicle that had been deliberately omitted from the official report. More damning still, Mitchell's patrol car maintenance records showed extensive front-end damage repaired immediately after Linda's death, damage inconsistent with his reported minor collision with a deer. "Agent Martinez," Jim said carefully, "my daughter has been living with suppressed memories of that night for 3 years. She was in the back seat when Mitchell forced us off the road. If she testifies." "We'll need her testimony to ensure conviction," the agent confirmed, "but we'll have the best child psychologists and victim advocates working with her. Dr. Foster has already confirmed that Emma's recovered memories show remarkable consistency with the physical evidence." The breakthrough came when Dr. Foster, working with FBI specialists, began carefully guided memory recovery sessions with Emma. Using techniques designed to unlock suppressed trauma without re-traumatizing the child, they helped Emma access memories that had been buried by her mind's natural protective mechanisms. "I remember now," Emma whispered during one session, her small voice carrying the weight of 3 years of buried terror. "The bad policeman was following Mommy's car in the rain. I saw him in the back window getting closer and closer. Then he hit us and we went spinning." The recovered memories revealed crucial details that only an actual witness could provide. Emma remembered the sound of metal against metal, the terrifying sensation of the car rolling, and most importantly, Mitchell's face illuminated by his patrol car's headlights as he approached their overturned vehicle. "He looked inside and saw me," Emma continued, her therapy session being recorded for evidence. "I was scared and crying, but I pretended to be asleep because something about him felt dangerous. He talked to Mommy, but she wasn't moving. Then he went back to his car and left us there." The FBI's psychological profile of Mitchell painted the picture of a desperate man spiraling deeper into paranoia and violence. His obsessive documentation of Emma's development showed increasing concern about her memory recovery, culminating in the decision to eliminate Thunder as a way to silence her permanently. Mitchell believed that traumatizing Emma severely enough would cause her to regress psychologically, Dr. Foster explained to the investigative team. By killing Thunder in front of her, he hoped to trigger such severe PTSD that she would be unable to function as a reliable witness, even if her memories did return. The psychological torture didn't end with Thunder's death. Mitchell's surveillance logs revealed his satisfaction at Emma's deteriorating condition following the shooting. He had documented her school absences, her panic attacks, and her withdrawal from normal activities with the clinical detachment of a predator monitoring his prey. Federal charges were filed on a Tuesday morning that would forever change Cedar Valley. Mitchell faced capital murder charges for Linda's death, along with federal counts of stalking, witness intimidation, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and animal cruelty under federal jurisdiction due to Thunder service animal status. Bradley and Lieutenant Henderson faced their own federal charges as accomplices in the cover-up. The FBI investigation revealed that Henderson had been aware of Mitchell's role in Linda's death and had actively worked to suppress evidence and intimidate witnesses. The systematic harassment of military families in Cedar Valley wasn't random, Agent Martinez explained to the assembled media. It was a coordinated effort to protect Officer Mitchell from exposure, using his colleagues and supervisors to create a climate of fear that would prevent victims from coming forward. The community reaction was swift and decisive. Mrs. McReynolds, now vindicated in her 3-year-old observations, became a vocal advocate for Emma and Jim. "I knew something was wrong that night," she told reporters. "That poor child has been living with a killer hunting her for 3 years, and we all failed to protect her." Dr. Foster's professional assessment provided the psychological framework for understanding the full scope of Mitchell's crimes. Emma wasn't just a witness to her mother's murder, she explained. She was a target for elimination who had been systematically stalked and psychologically tortured by the very people who were supposed to protect her. The revelation that Thunder had died protecting Emma from her mother's killer transformed the public narrative completely. The gentle bull wasn't just a beloved pet who had been needlessly killed. He was a hero who had given his life to shield a child from a predator who had already murdered once and was prepared to kill again. Emma's own understanding of the events began to shift as the truth emerged. Thunder knew, she told Dr. Foster during one of their sessions, and he always got nervous when that policeman was around. He could sense that the bad man wanted to hurt me, just like he hurt Mommy. The federal investigation expanded to include other potential victims. Mitchell's 3-year campaign of psychological warfare against Emma raised questions about his interactions with other children and families. The FBI began reviewing every case he had handled, every report he had filed, and every family he had encountered. For Jim, the revelation brought a complex mixture of vindication and additional trauma. His military instincts had been correct. His family had been under attack from an enemy operating within the system designed to protect them. But the knowledge that his daughter had been hunted for 3 years by her mother's killer created a rage that went beyond anything he had experienced in combat. "The hardest part," Jim confided to Sarah, "is knowing that if I had trusted my instincts about Linda's accident, if I had pushed harder for a real investigation, Emma might have been spared all of this. Thunder might still be alive." But Emma, with the wisdom that often emerges from trauma, provided a different perspective. "Daddy," she said as they sat together at Thunder's grave, "you couldn't have known. Bad people are good at hiding what they do. But Thunder knew. And he protected me until you could save me for real." The truth was finally emerging, but justice still lay ahead. Mitchell's desperation was growing as his world collapsed around him, and a cornered killer with nothing left to lose represented the most dangerous threat of all. The hunter had become the hunted, but the final confrontation was yet to come. The federal prosecution proceeded with unprecedented speed, driven by overwhelming evidence and intense national attention. Mitchell, faced with capital murder charges and the prospect of death row, accepted a plea bargain that would spare his life but ensure he never walked free again. Life without parole for Linda's murder, plus an additional 25 years for conspiracy, stalking, and civil rights violations. Bradley and Henderson received substantial sentences of their own. 8 to 12 years in federal prison for their roles in the cover-up, civil rights violations, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Their police careers were destroyed, their pensions forfeited, and they faced millions in civil liability to the Williams family and other victims of their systematic harassment. The courtroom was packed when Emma provided her victim impact statement through a carefully recorded video, sparing her the trauma of facing Mitchell in person while ensuring her voice was heard. "My name is Emma Williams, and I'm 12 years old," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. "Officer Mitchell killed my mommy 3 years ago, and then spent 3 years trying to scare me so I wouldn't remember. He killed my best friend Thunder because Thunder protected me from him. Thunder was the gentlest, kindest bull in the world, and he died because he loved me enough to keep me safe from the man who murdered my mother." Emma paused, gathering strength before continuing. "I want everyone to know that Thunder wasn't just a pet or even just a service animal. He was my guardian angel. He knew the bad man was dangerous before any of us understood what was happening. When Mitchell shot him, Thunder was doing exactly what he was trained to do, protecting a scared little girl from someone who wanted to hurt her." The impact of Emma's words rippled through the courtroom and beyond. Social media exploded with support for the brave 12-year-old who had survived her mother's murder, 3 years of psychological torture, and the killing of her beloved companion. #Justice for Emma and #Thunder. The hero became nationwide trending topics. Federal investigators discovered that the corruption in Cedar Valley ran deeper than anyone had imagined. The systematic harassment of military families wasn't an isolated phenomenon, but part of a broader pattern that had been quietly occurring in communities across Texas and beyond. Emma's case became the catalyst for a nationwide review of police misconduct and service animal protections. Captain Sullivan, who had taken over the disbanded Cedar Valley Police Department, worked closely with federal authorities to rebuild law enforcement in the community from the ground up. "What happened to the Williams family represents a complete institutional failure," he announced at a press conference. "We're not just reforming, we're starting over with completely new personnel, new training, and new accountability measures." The community response was remarkable in its unity and support. Citizens who had initially been divided by the controversy now rallied around Emma and Jim, understanding finally that they hadn't been troublemakers, but victims of a calculated campaign of terror by the very people sworn to protect them. Mrs. McReynolds became Emma's most vocal advocate, organizing community support and ensuring that Thunder's memory was properly honored. "That child has been through more than any person should endure in a lifetime," she told the local news. "But she's shown us all what courage looks like. She and Thunder, both heroes, and this community is going to make sure their sacrifice means something." 6 months after the arrests, Emma stood before the newly installed bronze statue of Thunder in Cedar Valley's Central Park. The memorial depicted the gentle giant in a protective stance, his massive frame conveying both strength and compassion. The inscription read, "Thunder, hero and guardian. His love was stronger than hate, his courage greater than cruelty." "Thunder," Emma said softly, placing fresh flowers at the base of the statue. "I hope you know that your story is helping other kids now. Congress passed Thunder's law because of you. Service animals all over the country are safer because you were brave enough to protect me." The federal legislation known as Thunder's Law had indeed passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, establishing harsh federal penalties for interference with service animals and creating a national registry to protect them from harassment. Emma had been invited to the White House for the bill signing ceremony, where the president himself had praised her courage in speaking truth to power. Dr. Foster documented Emma's remarkable recovery in what would become a landmark study on childhood trauma and resilience. Emma's healing process demonstrates the profound importance of truth, justice, and community support in trauma recovery, she wrote. The validation of her experiences and the accountability for those who harmed her were essential elements in her psychological restoration. The process hadn't been easy. Emma still struggled with nightmares occasionally, still felt anxiety around police officers she didn't know, and still missed Thunder with an ache that would probably never completely fade. But she had also discovered inner strengths she never knew she possessed. "I used to think I was weak because I got scared and needed Thunder to help me," Emma reflected during one of her therapy sessions. "But Dr. Foster helped me understand that needing help doesn't make you weak. Thunder needed me too. He needed someone to love and protect." We took care of each other. Jim's relationship with Emma had deepened through their shared ordeal. The experience of nearly losing her to a corrupt system had crystallized his priorities in a way that no military mission ever could. When the Army offered him a promotion that would require extended deployments, he declined without hesitation. "I spent 20 years protecting other people's children," he told his commanding officer. "Now I need to focus on protecting my own." The financial settlement from the civil lawsuit provided security for Emma's future, including a college fund and ongoing therapy resources. But more importantly, it sent a message to law enforcement agencies nationwide that systematic harassment and corruption would face severe consequences. 1 year after Thunder's death, the Williams family marked the anniversary not with grief alone, but with celebration of his life and legacy. The community gathered in the park around Thunder's statue for an annual festival that raised funds for service animal training programs nationwide. Emma, now 13 and noticeably more confident, served as the festival's keynote speaker. "A year ago, I lost my best friend in the most terrible way imaginable," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd. "Thunder died because bad people were scared of the truth he helped me remember. But Thunder's death wasn't meaningless. It exposed corruption that was hurting lots of families, and it led to laws that protect other service animals." She paused, looking up at the bronze statue that captured Thunder's gentle strength. "Thunder taught me that love is stronger than fear, that kindness is more powerful than cruelty, and that good friends never really leave us. He's still protecting me every day, just in a different way now." The festival also marked the introduction of Emma's new companion, a young brown Swiss calf named Hope, specially trained to continue Emma's therapy and provide the emotional support she still needed. Hope was different from Thunder, smaller, more traditionally calm, but equally devoted to Emma's well-being. "Hope isn't replacing Thunder," Emma explained to the crowd. "Nobody could ever replace him, but Thunder would want me to be happy and healthy, and Hope helps me with that. It's like Thunder sent her to continue taking care of me." Jim watched his daughter address the crowd with a pride that went beyond parental love. Emma had not just survived her ordeal, she had emerged from it as a powerful advocate for justice and a beacon of hope for other trauma survivors. Her transformation from victim to survivor to advocate demonstrated the resilience of the human spirit when supported by love, truth, and community. The legal reform sparked by Emma's case extended far beyond service animal protection. Police departments nationwide implemented new training programs on de-escalation, cultural sensitivity, and accountability. The systematic harassment of military families that had been quietly occurring in multiple communities was exposed and addressed through federal oversight. Dr. Foster's research on animal-assisted therapy and trauma recovery, based largely on Emma's case study, revolutionized treatment approaches for childhood PTSD. Thunder's story became a cornerstone example of the profound healing power of human-animal bonds and the devastating impact when those bonds are violently severed. Emma's academic performance not only recovered, but excelled as her confidence grew. Her teachers noted her increased empathy for other students facing difficulties and her natural leadership abilities. She began volunteering with younger children who had experienced trauma, sharing her story and demonstrating that healing was possible. "I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up," Emma announced during a school career presentation. "I want to help train more animals like Thunder and Hope to help kids who are scared or hurt. Animals understand things about feelings that people sometimes miss." The anniversary festival concluded with the dedication of a new therapy animal training facility funded by donations from across the country, inspired by Thunder's story. Emma cut the ribbon alongside the facility's first class of trainer candidates, young veterans learning to prepare service animals for children with PTSD. As the sun set over Cedar Valley, Emma and Jim visited Thunder's grave one final time before heading home. The simple marker in their pasture had been joined by thousands of flowers, letters, and small gifts from people around the world who had been touched by Thunder's story. "Do you think Thunder knows how famous he became?" Emma asked, kneeling to arrange fresh wildflowers by the headstone. "I think Thunder always knew he was special," Jim replied, placing his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "He knew his job was to love you and keep you safe, and he did that job perfectly, even when it cost him everything." Emma stood, brushing dirt from her knees, and looked across the pasture where Hope grazed peacefully in the evening light. "Daddy, do you think we're okay now? Really okay?" Jim considered the question seriously. They had been through trauma that would have destroyed many families. They had faced corruption, betrayal, and loss that seemed insurmountable. But they had also discovered reserves of strength, love, and community support that had carried them through the darkness. "I think we're more than okay, sweetheart," he said finally. "I think we're exactly where Thunder wanted us to be, safe, loved, and helping other people who need what we learned." As they walked back toward the house, Emma slipped her hand into her father's, a gesture that had become natural again after months of healing. Behind them, Thunder's statue stood silhouetted against the sunset, a permanent reminder that love, courage, and sacrifice could overcome even the darkest evil. The community of Cedar Valley had been forever changed by the events that began with a gunshot on a quiet October morning. What had started as a tragic case of police brutality had revealed a web of corruption, murder, and systematic harassment that went far beyond one small Texas town. But it had also demonstrated the power of truth, the importance of justice, and the remarkable resilience of a 12-year-old girl and her 800-pound guardian angel. Thunder's legacy lived on not just in the bronze statue or the federal legislation that bore his name, but in every child who would grow up safer because of the courage he and Emma had shown. His story proved that heroes come in all sizes and species, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought not on foreign battlefields, but in the quiet neighborhoods where families should feel safe. Emma Williams had learned that the world could be cruel and unfair, that bad people sometimes wear badges, and that loss could cut so deep it felt like dying. But she had also learned that good people outnumber bad ones, that truth is stronger than lies, and that love, even love for an 800-pound bull, could literally change the world. As the stars emerged over Cedar Valley, Emma made a promise to Thunder's memory and to all the children who might face similar darkness in the future. She would never stop fighting for justice, never stop believing in the power of love, and never forget that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to be silenced. The speechless moment had passed, replaced by a voice that would echo for generations. Emma Williams, survivor and advocate, had found her voice, and the world was listening. In our twilight years, we've witnessed America's evolving landscape, its triumphs and failures, promises of equality too often unfulfilled, and systems that sometimes protect power rather than people. Emma and Thunder's story reminds us that justice, while imperfect, remains possible when courage meets wisdom. Like many of our generation who fought battles both abroad and at home, Colonel Williams understood that the greatest strength lies not in vengeance, but in principled persistence. His struggle echoes our own experiences with institutions that resist change and the painful lessons we've learned about choosing our battles wisely. Yet Emma's ultimate victory affirms what we've always known, that love for our children, our communities, and our ideals sustains us through darkness. Thunder's sacrifice wasn't just about protecting one child. It exposed a system of corruption that threatened countless families. As we watch younger generations navigate these same waters, let us share this wisdom. True justice heals rather than harms, builds rather than destroys, and ultimately allows wounded hearts like Emma's to find their way back to joy. This is our legacy to them. Not perfect solutions, but the unshakable belief that tomorrow can be better than today. What childhood companion helped you through your darkest moments? How do you think communities can better protect their most vulnerable members? Share your thoughts below. Your wisdom matters.